I'm Ethan Eismann. I'm the SVP of Design at Slack. It's great to be here. I just want to say thank you to Spark for having me, and it's a real honor. So today I'm going to share with you productivity lessons that I've learned from my time working at Slack. And before we get going, I just want to get a quick raise of hands. Who here has heard of Slack? Okay, so most of you. Who here hasn't heard of Slack? Actually, that's a better way to ask. Okay, nobody's not heard of Slack. That's cool. Who here uses Slack on a regular basis? Okay. Oh, I wish it was everybody's hands were up in the air. So anyway, I think you're all going to get some good insights from this, whether you use Slack actively or not. But as was mentioned before, Slack's mission is to make people's working lives more simple, pleasant, and productive. And our mission, as our mission states, productivity is incredibly important to us, and we take it very seriously. So not only is our mission important for us and how we serve our customers, but we've also tried to live that mission ourselves. And today, I'm going to walk you through a bit about how we established a culture that is obsessed with productivity. So throughout Slack's history, our leadership is focused relentlessly on cultivating the right conditions for productivity, at the company level, at the team level, and at the individual level. And we spent countless hours analyzing how productive organizations work. We've also experimented on ourselves to unlock key insights into organizational and personal productivity. And so today, we're going to dive into Slack's productivity focus and learn the secrets to its success. You know, Slack has lived this accelerated life cycle from a startup to rapid growth through an IPO, and then we were acquired by Salesforce for $28 billion. It's a pretty large acquisition, one of the biggest in tech. So we're going to walk through that journey and focus on the lessons that we've learned from it. But before we dive into Slack, I'd like to take a look at the broader topic of productivity and work. And this will provide us, I think, a good sort of grounding in the topic, and we'll use this as we walk through Slack's journey. So at its most basic, productivity is the efficiency measure of a thing converting inputs to outputs. But the equation isn't so simple when it comes to knowledge workers, right? Because this is people like us, because our inputs and outputs are much fuzzier. We're creative individuals who are given the autonomy to make our own decisions about what we want to work on and about the plans that we have. So we need to look more deeply into this productivity equation. On the left, we've got the value of the work we do. Like, is this project we're working on important and valuable to our company and our customers? And on the right is the efficiency of the work, right? It's like, what's the quantity of that valuable work that each of us do individually and collectively as a company? So let's first look at how we think about value. Okay, value is really the important work that contributes to your company's mission and its goals. The company level, you should have your priorities. What's your company mission? What are your quarterly goals? What are your yearly goals? And at the team level, these goals are broken down into projects that groups of individuals can work on. And then at the individual level, you orient yourself around those projects and the goals of those projects, and also your own goals for personal growth and how you want to learn and evolve. Okay, and when companies are at their best, there's this tight alignment across all three levels of the company. You have these top-line goals cascading down to the individual level, and these individual level goals are all sort of ratcheting up to the top-line goals. And then there's discipline across every level. Every level interrogates their tasks in order to weed out those that aren't a priority so that everything left over is of high value. Now, this seems pretty simple, but it's actually really hard to get right, and we're going to talk a lot more about this today. This is especially hard to get right as your organization grows in size. Okay, so that's value. Now let's talk a little bit about efficiency. So there's so much that goes into making people, teams, and organizations more efficient, but the three most important factors are as follows. So first is culture, or the behaviors and the rituals and practices that your organization adopts to guide the environment in which people work. The second factor is people, right? These are the people you hire and the way you develop them. You can kind of think about people this way, like every person in your organization has an efficiency quotient. It's the amount of quality work they can produce in a given amount of time. So the question is, do you have the right people with the right experience working on the right things? And then that last factor is tools, the software and hardware that's used to help your workforce do more and faster. Throughout human history, the tools and technology that we've developed have accelerated human capacity to do more. You saw what Scott Galloway was talking about, this massive opportunity for productivity that comes with AI. Well, VisiCalc and Excel were tools just like that back in the day that helped accountants be much more efficient. Slack is a tool that helps teams be much more efficient when it comes to collaboration. And I think one of the reasons why we're so excited about AI is that we see this great opportunity with AI helping with efficiency and productivity. So altogether, culture, people, and tools are the main factors when it comes to efficiency, okay? And when we add value back in, we have this sort of equation for productivity. And a simple way to think about this is, do you have the right culture carried forward by the right people, using the best tools, working on the most important things, and critically, as we'll see, not working on unimportant things. Okay, so we've got a basic understanding of the productivity equation. Let's use this framework as we walk through Slack's evolution from a small startup to a $28 billion acquisition by Salesforce, and how we manage our productivity matrix along the way. All right, we'll start in the early years, the years when Slack was just a baby, just beginning. Now, did you know that Slack was a pivot from a different company? It was originally a gaming company called TinySpec, and they were building a game called Glitch, and Glitch didn't work out, but they built this collaboration tool based on IRC that showed promise. That's Stuart Butterfield. He's the hero of our story today. He was Slack's CEO for many years. We're going to talk about him a lot in this presentation because he really set the tenor and tone for Slack's collaboration culture. Okay, when Slack pivoted, they laid off most of the TinySpec staff and kept only 8 people, okay? But this original set of 8 people were highly experienced and capable at their jobs, and that meant they were super efficient. Also, many of them had worked together for many years. So they can align really quickly. And the goal of this powerful team was really get Slack out to market. Now, their tool set from the beginning was simple. They used this one spreadsheet to track all the tasks they needed to build. Every day, they just review the spreadsheet, check the status of the tasks, all 8 of the people in the team. And of course, they were using Slack to collaborate at this time as well. And let's talk about the value of the work that they were doing. Okay, because these were the early days of Slack, everything they were working on were the most foundational tasks. And every one of those tasks was of an inherently high value. Like billing design meant that if they built that, Slack would actually get paid. That's a pretty valuable task. And organizationally at the time, Slack was very flat. You had the CTO, a guy named Cal, making tech decisions, and Stuart, the CEO, making product decisions. And so it was really easy for them to cascade down their decisions to the team and get quick alignment. And so in those early years, they had great alignment on their goals, all tasks were of high value, and every person on the team operated at a high level of efficiency. So life was perfectly productive for them. Now, culturally, this early team at Slack established this focus on trust and transparency, and this was driven in part by their use of Slack as a tool. See, Slack in the product, for those of you who aren't familiar, there's this concept of a channel. It's where the work happens, conversations happen, files are shared, etc. Channels can be private to only those in the channel, or they can be public for everybody in the company. In those early days, there were just no private channels. Okay, almost everything was captured in public channels, viewable by everybody. So when decisions were made, people would all see the decision. There was perfect transparency. And they had this ethos, default the channel to public, that is really carried over to this day. Now, this is kind of crazy. The channel that I'm showing here is from 2014. It's in a channel called Announce Global. We still use Announce Global as a company, and I can go into the channel and scroll all the way back to 2014 and see these crazy conversations that were happening back then when they launched Slack. So this is pretty radical transparency here. Okay, now on to our next phase, Slack as an uncomfortable teenager. So between 2015 and 2018, Slack grew from 45 to over 1,500 people. And that's an incredible growth spurt, and it came with massive success in the market, but it also came with massive growing pains in the company. And one of the challenges with scaling so quickly is that every new person added to the company has their own perspectives about the work that they were supposed to do that was influenced by their past experiences in past companies. So new people, new perspective, less alignment. And this created a challenge to ensure that everyone was able to march in the right decision. Now, when Slack was small, every task mattered critically. But as Slack grew, each task assigned to every new member was less important. It was necessarily less critical. The combination of these two factors, lack of alignment with diminishing value of tasks, started to become a real problem. In fact, there are many cases when teams would work on a feature and they'd hit 100% of their goals, but actually that only mattered 100% to the actual goal that really mattered to the overarching company, that laddered up to those top-line goals. And this team would celebrate getting 100%, but their target was entirely wrong in the first place. The other thing that started to seep into the company was this concept of HRLA. We had an acronym for it, but it was hyper-realistic work-like activity. Okay? The more people, the less clarity about those most important things. It was easy for people to fool themselves into the fact that they were doing work when they were just really, really busy. So they'd leave work at the end of the day and they were tired and exhausted, but they hadn't actually generated work of really any value. So also during this phase of growth, Slack needed to codify its culture. And that was critically important for Slack to attract and retain really good people and create an environment in which people thrive. So importantly, Slack's founders have always been very sort of self-critical and highly critical of themselves and the team that they were building. And so they were also open to experimentation and change. And this mindset helped them observe the company's culture, assess whether it was aligned with their outcomes, and make adjustments along the way. And they cascaded this mindset down throughout teams. And this message, also in that global announce channel, Stuart, the CEO, he's taking accountability for the company culture and for improving it. And he demonstrates this growth mindset, a little bit of vulnerability here, because if people see that the CEO can actually admit that he's made some mistakes, then it's easy for every individual in the company to do the same. And as part of honing Slack's work culture, they rolled out this motto: work hard and go home. They even made a poster and put that in the office. And the expectation is that you only have 3 to 4 hours of doing really focused, productive work at the office. And so you want to focus on the most important tasks. Working hard doesn't mean just working long. It means working smart and being really judicious in what you focus on. Then you go home and you recharge and you live your life. In fact, at Slack, people don't use Slack after 5 p.m. We don't use Slack on the weekends. We want to preserve that time for people to recharge. It's one of the reasons why I actually joined Slack in the first place. And along with more people came the need for better tools and methodologies for alignment and efficiency. It was no longer Cal and those 8 people in a spreadsheet. They had hundreds of people, in fact, thousands of people they needed to align and coordinate. And so to help with this, they brought in sort of a methodology called OKRs. Who here has heard of OKRs? Objectives and key results. Okay, great. So they even actually brought in John Doerr, the author of this book, to help coach them and counsel them on how to do OKRs more effectively. But during this time, even as Slack was crushing it in the market and growing and proactively working on its people and the culture, there was a number of big issues that were starting to come up. First, there was this lack of scrutiny on the value of projects and the tasks, and that led to wasted efforts and a lack of innovation. There's also this hurla, more people acting busy, more work on stuff that really didn't matter. And there's also this leadership skill gap. As Slack grew, they needed to grow their leaders, but they didn't actually have leaders who were experienced enough to be able to drive things forward. And so by 2019, something had to change. So by 2019, growth had leveled out. We grew headcount by only 25%, which was still fast, but it was manageable. And we were getting more towards an IPO. So we were growing into this confident young adult about to graduate college. And one of the most important personnel changes that Slack made at that point is they brought on a new CPO, new engineering leaders, new product leaders. I was brought on as the head of design. And so this leadership hiring had a ripple down effect. So these leaders were great at helping the team focus on the things of higher value. And importantly, they detected projects of low value and they just promptly canceled them. And this wasn't easy. Some pet projects were canceled and people's feelings were hurt, but focus was this new mantra, and saying no was the key to better focus. And in response to Slack's growing pains, the company doubled down on its focus on culture. So Slack took the time to codify its cultural values. Stuart, the CEO, wrote down the values, and then he walked every new hire through these values in onboarding sessions. He put the time into doing that. And this enabled this really crisp and clear cultural connection between the CEO down to every member of the organization. Another example of cultural alignment was the development of our product principles. So again, these came from Stuart. I actually helped him write these. They were used as a cheat sheet for product teams to help understand what was expected of them. And when teams followed these principles, their projects proceeded smoothly and efficiently. And after a short period, everybody was using these, and we just saw a lot greater throughput in projects. And with this renewed focus on people and culture, our productivity significantly increased, and we started to ship more features than ever before. So we were in a good spot. All right, last phase we'll talk about is the pandemic. So in early 2020, the pandemic hit. Like all companies, Slack went remote. And like all companies, we had this problem. It was a primary concern, which was, how do we remain productive in this new world? But unlike most companies, we had the opportunity to build a collaborative tool that became more valuable the more people were working remotely. So we had this obligation to actually do something about it. So we set out to do 2 things. First, we wanted to learn from customers about this new era of remote work. And second, we wanted to experiment in our own company about improving new ways of productivity. Right? We had this experimental mindset, and we set out to actually run experiments on ourselves. Now, we were fortunate to have a culture that was so open to experimentation. And our willingness to experiment helped us adapt. You probably all remember this era of like the endless Zoom meetings, right? When you're just like a square on the screen, and there was this thing that happened to everybody called Zoom fatigue. Well, we knew this was a real issue, and we knew we needed to do something about this. In fact, Microsoft had some research that indicated between 2020 and 2022, time spent meetings more than tripled. So things are pretty dire, and we need to fix them. So we took a number of steps to combat this, and these are steps that are still with us today. So we leaned into that experimental mindset and decided to try out some new ways of working. First, we came up with this concept called Fridays or no meeting days. We call them Focus Fridays. So these are days when there's just no meeting scheduled, and they give people an entire day to focus and do productive work, and everybody loved this. Now, for the remaining 4 days, it required teams to evaluate their meetings. Teams needed to basically either pack all their meetings into 4 days and have no time for work, or eliminate meetings. And guess what teams decided to do? They decided to just eliminate their meetings, which was fantastic. We also experimented 1 week per quarter dedicated to focus. We call these focus weeks, and they, like Focus Fridays, were well loved by people. Again, they love this uninterrupted time just to do focused work. Now, you may be wondering how we managed through these sort of changes in the organization. And as a software company that builds tools to make people's lives more productive, we did just that for ourselves and for our customers. So first, we pivoted our roadmap to build a series of tools that made video and audio collaboration easier for people to do without using Zoom. In fact, we called this Huddles, and our first version of Huddles, it didn't have video, it was just audio because people just were tired of staring at screens. We tested it out with video. It was just a real quick way to start up a huddle with video, not an actual call, but a huddle with video. We tested it on our customers, and it worked really well, and so then we made video huddles. And in both cases, we wanted these huddles to feel really lightweight, super ad hoc, and actually fun to use. We also created video and audio clips that allow people to share updates and provide feedback via video. And so video clips specifically have helped teams align and provide status to each other asynchronously. On my design team, we just massively pivoted to sharing designs in video clips instead of meetings, because when somebody creates a video clip, I can watch it at 1.5x the speed. That's great. I'm able to provide comments on it, and people can see my comments. And then all of these video clips can be shared in the shared channel or elsewhere. So everybody can kind of see the feedback around what we're talking about. So I'm sharing feedback here to a channel of 175 people, and they could just get the gist of where my head's at. So with clips, everybody can just hear what I think. In addition, during the pandemic, we streamline our quarterly planning process using clips. So at the start of every quarter, teams will come up with their OKRs. They'll put them into a clip. They'll share those clips up to the CPO and the CTO in, again, a public channel. Then our leadership can view the clips, provide then feedback down to the teams that everybody can see because it's a public channel. And they have that back and forth debate, and they align very quickly. We do this in the course of a week. It's pretty incredible. It's incredibly transparent. So it's interesting to kind of think about this evolution from back in the day, Slack was this spreadsheet being run with like 8 people, to now you've got thousands of people who are sharing clips into this transparent public channel. It's a lot of evolution over the course of 10 years. Okay, so our story ends in the middle of the pandemic when Slack was acquired by Salesforce. And in many ways, this acquisition was an affirmation of Slack's focus on productivity. Why? Well, Slack had become this indispensable tool for work that was beloved by many companies, which made Slack incredibly valuable. And as I hope you've seen here, we became such an indispensable tool because of our obsession with focus on value alignment, around transparency, self-critique, and experimentation. Okay, so that Slack journey from a baby all the way to the acquisition. What Slack went through, within that 10 years was a full range, and it may be what many of you are experiencing now or what you will experience in your own companies. So let's highlight some of the key productivity lessons that we've learned from this journey. So our first lesson is to establish a culture focused on improving productivity. Now, Slack was obsessed with productivity, right? I wouldn't go so far as to say you need to be obsessed with it, but just focus on a culture of improving productivity. At Slack, we think there's always a more productive version of our company and for us each as individuals. And you've seen quotes from Stuart, our CEO, about this throughout the presentation. And this growth-oriented mindset allowed us to adapt towards greater productivity by experimenting with new policies like Focus Fridays, or by building tools and pivoting our roadmap to build new tools like huddles or clips. So a few recommendations for establishing a culture of productivity and improvement. So first, take the time to analyze your team and culture with a focus on productivity. So take a step back and reflect on how confident you are that your team is aligned around the right goals and that every person within your team is optimizing for important work, and importantly, that people are saying no to wasteful work. So just take the time to think about it. Second, interrogate your team's productivity practices. So you can ask yourself, what new kind of productivity practices have we experimented with, new tools for productivity we've experimented with over the last 6 months? And if your answer is 0, you probably don't yet have a good productivity-oriented culture. And then lastly, and this is really critical, your leaders need to set the example. And I bring up this quote by Stewart again to underscore this point. Leaders need to send the message that productivity matters. And they do this by demonstrating productivity is important to them and by facilitating discussion around topics of productivity. I have conversations with my leadership team on a regular basis about the productivity of our team every quarter, right? It's just a leader, I'm setting the stage to have that conversation with folks. Okay, lesson 2 is to encourage trust. So recall how Slack's channels are public by default? Well, that, of course, is by design. As a company, we took specific steps to increase our transparency as much as possible as a means to cultivate trust across our workforce. So why does this matter? Get ready for a bunch of stats here. So we're going to dive into this topic of trust via research that was established by Slack's own Workforce Lab. So a bit of context on Workforce Lab. It's a lab that surveys over 10,000 knowledge workers every quarter, and they survey them across 5 continents. And they survey them about the way that people are thinking and feeling about work. And they recently ran a survey focused on productivity, and the results were absolutely fascinating. So first, they found that across survey participants, trust was the #1 driver of productivity. It beat out other factors like job level, schedule flexibility, or working location. Pretty incredible. In fact, employees who feel trusted are 2 times more productive than those who don't feel trusted. And trust doesn't just lead to higher productivity. Employees who feel trusted have a 2.1 times greater ability to focus, 4.2 times greater sense of belonging, and 4.3 times overall satisfaction with their job. It's pretty incredible. In fact, employees who feel trusted are more likely to go above and beyond in their work and to really push themselves. And those who don't feel trusted are likely looking for a new job. So it should be pretty obvious what kind of culture you want to foster in order to drive productivity, and it's one that's centered around trust. So what drives trust? Well, it turns out the key driver of trust is transparency, which leads us to lesson number 3. Slack's Workforce Lab found that desk workers, knowledge workers, who say that their leadership is transparent are 1.6 times more likely to feel trusted than those who don't. Remember, I keep on talking about Slack defaulting to these public channels. Well, we do that so everyone can see how and why decisions are made. At Slack, the way we use the tool reinforces transparency. And it's clear that the opposite true is here. In organizations where employees report that leadership isn't transparent, workers are more likely to experience burnout and are likely looking for a new job. And this stands to reason. If you ever have that experience of sort of getting a direction but not understanding why it came to you, or having a manager or boss bark down orders to you, you feel stressed out. You want to kind of get out of that situation, and you're not able to really focus and be productive. And I've also felt how great it can be when working in an organization that is transparent. You feel included. You feel like you're part of the team. It's clear that transparency also drives well-being and productivity. So when desk workers feel in the know, they report feeling 1.8 times more productive, 2.3 times more focused, and 9.4 times more satisfied than in companies that lack transparency. This is huge. So to encourage transparency and trust, I recommend the following. So first, as a leader, regularly communicate why decisions are made. People don't just care about the what. What is the decision? It takes more effort to communicate, but they really do care about the why. So put the effort into it. It's worth it. You'll get the reward, and the reward is greater trust, which has all those other benefits. Second, consider building a culture based on collaboration and humility. These 2 cultural qualities lead to a greater level of empathy between your employees, and greater empathy builds greater trust. And then lastly, consider using tools that enable transparency. So tools like Slack, and there's other types of tools too, like Loom does the same thing as Clips, as an example. They encourage people to share their work, and they can be a really effective way to means to increase transparency across your entire organization. Okay. Now on to lesson number 4. Work hard and smart, and then go home and recharge. So remember this slide? So to reiterate, this whole mantra was built to defend against wasted hours and to ensure people were focused on the most important work instead of doing least important work, so they can just go home and recharge. And I think we did a pretty good job of instituting this kind of culture at Slack. But the unfortunate reality is that 2 in 5 desk workers say they regularly work after hours, and it's not because they want to. It's because they are pressured to. And this is really bad for productivity, because those employees who are working after hours report more work-related stress, lower satisfaction, and more burnout. So when you kind of consider this like lower productivity throughout the day, we're basically just wasting time, given that we're spending more time at work and getting less out of it. And the reason cited for working after hours is basically not having enough time in the day. So what's taking up people's time? Well, from what I've seen, it's this dreaded work of work. It's meetings. Now, not all meetings are bad, but many are pretty horrible. In fact, in a recent 5,000-person survey from Atlassian, they ran this across 4 continents, they discovered that meetings are ineffective 72% of the time. Unnecessary status meetings or meetings where there are more people in attendance that are contributing, these are all different types of ineffective meetings. So useless meetings are clearly a problem. What can we do about them? Okay, at the extreme end, you could be like Shopify. They deleted 322,000 hours of meetings a year in a company of 10,000 employees. They called this useful subtraction, okay? And some of those meetings were added back, but overall, this reduction in meetings added essentially 150 more employees to the company. That's pretty incredible. It's also very extreme. At Slack, as I mentioned, we have Focus Fridays and Focus Weeks, and people love these because they're able to get that uninterrupted time for meaningful work that requires the dedicated focus. And during these focus days and focus weeks, people still collaborate because that's necessary to get their job done, but they use tools like Slack to send messages and have video clips. They might even meet, but they're not scheduled meeting. They're always ad hoc and spun up, and they're about the work, and that makes all the difference in the world. So here are my recommendations for reducing meetings. So first, think about experimenting with team-wide collaboration blocks during the week or quarter. You can adopt an idea like Focus Fridays or Focus Weeks, or spin your own format as well. The key here is that it's team-wide, so that everybody can sort of take that time focused together, and it reduces scheduling conflicts. Next, encourage people to take control of their calendar and block out time for deep work, okay? Then encourage people to set boundaries around those deep work times and push back if others schedule over it. After this, encourage people to interrogate whether they should be in a meeting or not, and make it acceptable for them to decline meetings with reason. Okay, I've had people in my team tell me after I've asked for a meeting that, hey, I'd rather send you a clip, and I've been super happy with that. In fact, I've celebrated this. And that leads to the next recommendation. As a leader, you need to set the example. You should respect people's no meeting blocks, so don't schedule time over their meeting blocks. There's a lot of leaders here. We have really busy schedules. We oftentimes think it's okay for us to schedule time over other people's meetings. They're going to conform to us. You can't do that if you want to have this kind of culture. And then celebrate people protecting their focus time, which leads us to our next lesson here, which is that it's important to find people with the right skills and who want to grow. Okay, so I don't have any magic sort of like wand or advice for how to find great people, but one thing that I've learned from Slack is that it's important to hire the right people with the right experience to do the right job. It's what we kind of did in 2019. We brought those new leaders in. And the most important thing that I'd say looking for in new employees is, do they actually have a hard skill that you need to do the most important things, and do they have a growth mindset? So can they code? Can they market? Can they do sales? Are they executives who can make the right decisions with authority? But it's also really important to teach people to manage their time and energy more effectively. This is super critical. And I suggest making sure that everybody has quarterly goals that are clearly outlined and that are aligned with the company's goals and their own individual growth goals. And then make sure people feel empowered to manage their time to achieve these goals. And part of this productivity culture is to make it okay for people to say no to meetings or tasks that don't align with their goals. If you can do this at scale across your organization, where every employee has clear goals and the power to focus on their most important tasks, this is an incredibly powerful way to increase productivity. And it's relatively easy to do this when you're a one-person company, or it should be. Now, when you're an 8-person company, it should be pretty easy. But when you scale to a 100-person or a 1,000-person company, if you can maintain this productivity-minded culture and empower people to do this, it's incredible. Okay, this is going to lead us to our next lesson, which is value and alignment. So it's critical to invest the time and energy into frameworks and culture that enable teams and individuals to critically evaluate the value of their work. So first, I suggest using a framework like OKRs if you don't already. Start at the top of the company OKRs. Make sure teams and individuals have those OKRs. Make sure people understand the connection between their individual OKRs and the company's top-line OKRs. That's really important. And then encourage people to interrogate their weekly and daily tasks along with their goals. So this doesn't need to take a ton of time. Just a reflection on what did I do this last week and how did this align to my goals? And this super simple practice can really help people be more mindful of whether they're spending their time on the most valuable work or whether they're engaging in wasteful work. It's like a weekly sort of reorientation. All right, lastly, it's important for leaders to be really obsessed with their people working on the right things. And this isn't to say that you should all become micromanagers here, but it's important to be clear and transparent and consistent in your communication about the need for people to be aligned and focused on the most valuable tasks out of the millions of potential things that your company and your people could be doing. Alignment is really about abolishing that HERLA, or the hyper-realistic work-like activity, and all the nonsense work which isn't productive or creative. Because when we're aligned, we're saying no to the stuff that doesn't produce, which in turn leads for more time for the creative stuff that is productive. And as a leader, some of the best conversations that I have with people is about their priorities. It's about what matters most, and importantly, what matters least. All right, lesson 7, how people work matters more than where people work. So let's talk about remote work culture really quickly and its impact on productivity. So for many people, remote work works. Slack went remote in the pandemic. We still are remote today. But when it comes to productivity, the verdict is still out on whether remote work actually makes teams more productive. But what is clear, however, is that there are a number of significant benefits with remote work that are outside of productivity. These include the ability to hire from a broader talent pool, an increased level of flexibility enjoyed by your employees, especially parents and caretakers, and that greater employee flexibility leads to a level of retention and engagement in those employees. And then, of course, there's a positive environmental impact, especially for people who have to commute via vehicle. I'll say this, however, Slack has found there's obviously a considerable benefit of having people come together face-to-face, whether it's once a week or once a quarter, because that face time between coworkers improves team bonds, improves collaboration, brings out the humanity in folks. We heard this from Professor Galloway, how important it is to actually get people together in real space. And at Slack, what we do is we make sure that we have scheduled events that we take really seriously. So we have every week, basically a breakfast. Everybody comes in that day, and we all have breakfast together. And then for people who want to come into the office. And then there's basically a provision where every team should have an on-site, in-person on-site every year. When people come to those on-site, it's not about work. It's about getting together, getting to know each other, because then we're able to collaborate more closely, create more empathetic and emotional bonds, which then increases trust when we go back to our home offices. All right. So now on to our last lesson, which is to use tools and technology to transform your culture of productivity. So as we've seen, when it comes to productivity, culture and people are the most direct means towards improvement, okay? That's right. By now, it should be super clear that from my perspective, it's not about like adapting the next AI tool to unleash productivity. It's right there in front of you. It's your people and your culture that you have today, okay? These are the things that are gonna get you the greatest impact, ideally in the shortest amount of time. But the tools that we use also play a part in this equation, because culture helps you determine what tools you want to use, and then also your tools help reinforce your culture. So as an example, Slack used Slack instead of email because we like the sort of fast-paced, quick way of Slack working versus the slow, ponderous way of email. So we chose a tool to reinforce and reflect our productivity culture. Likewise, we default our channels to open and public because we have a commitment to transparency and the trust that's reinforced by showing how decisions are made. So again, we explicitly use Slack in a certain way to promote our culture. And also, our culture productivity is reinforced by building tools like clips and huddles that made it easier for people to actually reduce their meeting time, okay, which increased time on more important and focused work. So here are my recommendations for using tools to transform culture. So first, when deciding which tools to use to improve productivity, critically think first about how you want to identify a cultural change. Do you want greater transparency, fewer meetings, more focus and alignment around your most important projects? Start with the goals first and then identify which tools support those goals. Don't just say, I need AI. It's going to make me productive. Focus on the goal first, then figure out what tool is going to support it. And next, be open to experimentation. And like any good experiment, start small, okay? Try one thing and see how it works and build from there. When my design team started using clips, only 2 designers used clips. I saw it. I said, this is awesome. It's working really well for us. Then I sent clips back to other designers. Then more people started using clips, and now everybody on my design team uses clips. And if you don't, it's just kind of strange. So we built up that culture over time. All right, so that was the last lesson. Let's wrap up now. Today we've learned about the history of Slack's productivity-obsessed culture, and we've used that to identify a number of lessons which should help you improve productivity at the workplace. So now I'd just like to encourage you to reflect on the dimensions of productivity at your own company and identify whether there's an opportunity to improve across culture, people, tools, or value alignment. And if there is, think about which specific productivity lessons you might want to experiment with and then put them into practice, because there is no time like the present to be more productive. Thank you.